Hello, welcome to the channel. Subscribe, leave a like, and don't forget to write a comment. Enjoy watching.
I guess you never really expect the moment you become invisible to be so loud. The backyard was full of laughter, the smell of ribs slow cooking on Dad's ancient Weber, and the clinking of wine glasses raised high under those stupid paper lanterns Rachel insisted on every year since Pinterest became her religion. My parents' house hadn't changed since I was in high school, the same cracked concrete around the pool, the same patchy lawn Dad pretended was just resting, and the same old stereo blasting Springsteen like it was still 1987. Everything was familiar, painfully so. I brought my peach bourbon pie like I always do, spent the whole damn morning in my tiny apartment kitchen, hand-rolling crust like Mom taught me, back when she still saw me. They didn't touch it. I placed it on the table next to the store-bought cheesecake someone obviously grabbed from Costco on the way over, and within minutes that ugly plastic dome was empty, paper plate scraps left behind like it was the holy grail of desserts. My pie sat there like an afterthought, sweating in the sun, ignored, and I felt stupid for even noticing. We all gathered around the picnic table when Mom called out, her voice high-pitched and already too excited. "Everyone, let's raise a glass to Rachel!" And that was the moment. That was the second I disappeared. My parents stood like proud statues, arm in arm, holding their glasses of Cabernet like they were at some goddamn awards gala. "To our brilliant girl," Dad said, his voice cracking with pride. "Senior Vice President before 37, we couldn't be prouder." The applause came quick, too quick. Everyone knew the line by heart. Rachel stood with her perfect teeth and her corporate confidence, nodding with just the right amount of humility. She did a little mock bow. "I couldn't have done it without the support of my family," she said. And that was rich, considering she hadn't returned Mom's calls in 3 weeks, and only showed up because she knew there'd be photographers from the local paper for her little feature on women in business. Nobody mentioned me, not once. No, and let's not forget Carla, who's been working her ass off keeping that nonprofit afloat in a post-COVID world. No, Carla's the real MVP, always shows up. Not even a nod in my direction. I was a prop, a warm body with a pie no one wanted. And still, I smiled. I took empty plates back to the kitchen, washed dishes with my sleeves rolled up. Aunt Carol said, "You're always so helpful, sweetheart," while sipping her 5th glass of boxed rosé, but her voice didn't even reach me. I left before the cake, slipped out with barely a goodbye, just a wave toward the crowd, and even then, only half of them noticed. My car ride home was silent. No music, no podcast, just the hum of the air conditioner and the faint sticky feeling of sweat and disappointment. I didn't cry. I'm past crying. I just felt this familiar dull ache, like biting into something cold and feeling it all the way down to your gums. That night, around 10, I was brushing my teeth when my phone buzzed. It was Rachel. I stared at her name for a second, thinking maybe she finally realized I was gone, that maybe she wanted to say thank you, or sorry, or even just ask how I was. But the message was short. Just one line. Mom's crying nonstop. "What did you say to her?" And I froze. I read it 3 times. What did you say to her? Like I had cornered Mom and whispered poison in her ear. Like I was the villain at a family BBQ thrown in honor of someone else. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I set the phone down, rinsed my mouth, and looked at myself in the mirror. Same face I've had for 41 years. Same tired eyes. And for a split second, I wondered if maybe I had said something. Maybe not out loud, but maybe, just maybe, I let something slip. A look, a silence, a truth too sharp to ignore. Because the thing is, I didn't say anything, not really, but I also didn't not say something. There was a moment back by the sink when Mom came in to grab more forks, and I was alone, drawing a wine glass. She looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time all day. Her lip trembled, just barely, and I leaned in, drawing that glass so slow, and I said, "You always were better at pretending, Mom." That's it, that's all I said. Then I handed her the dry glass and smiled. So maybe I didn't toast. Maybe I didn't cheer, but I also didn't play along. And in this family, that's enough to be called betrayal. But let me ask you something, because I think you know the answer better than I do. Ever been in a room full of people who swear they love you and still feel like furniture? Ever watch your own mother raise a glass to one daughter while using the other one to pass the damn salt? What would you have said? Or worse, what would you have not said? You want to understand the pie and why it mattered more than it ever should have? Then you need to understand this wasn't about dessert. It never was. It was about effort, about intention, about being the kind of person who shows up even when no one's looking for you. That pie, the one sitting untouched under a piece of wax paper curling at the edges in the summer heat, wasn't just sugar and crust. It was a symbol, maybe the last damn symbol of me trying. And not just at that barbecue, but my whole life. I made that pie with the same hands I used to do Rachel's science projects back in middle school. The same hands that held Mom's when she cried about losing Grandma. The same ones I used to move boxes when Dad threw his back out last winter. But in my family, effort wasn't the currency. Visibility was. Flash, performance, sound bites, and perfect photos, and neat little packages of success you could share in group texts with extended cousins you haven't seen in a decade. Rachel knew how to give them that, always did. She had the right clothes, the right jokes, the perfect way of tossing her hair while she fake laughed at Dad's tired jokes. I, on the other hand, was the quiet one, the helper, the one they leaned on when they needed things done, but forgot to thank once the crisis passed. And no matter how many pies I baked, how many hospital visits I made, how many nights I stayed on the phone talking Mom down from whatever spiral she was on about Dad's cholesterol, or the water heater, or a neighbor's divorce, it was never enough to earn a spotlight. I was useful, not celebrated. Present, but never central. And so when Rachel stood there last weekend, clutching her third glass of wine and bathing in the applause of people who knew her LinkedIn title but not her truth, something inside me cracked. Not like a plate falling to the floor, more like a slow, quiet fracture that had been forming for decades, right beneath the surface. And the pie just sat there, becoming more of a metaphor with every passing minute. I watched it the way you watch a dog waiting at the door for an owner that's never coming home. I could barely look at Rachel's cheesecake without feeling sick. That smug little plastic dome, perfectly store-bought and easy, just like everything she does. Smooth on the surface and empty at the core. But I hadn't come to start anything. Not really. I told myself I was past the point of needing validation, past the bitterness, above it. Yet bitterness has a way of curdling slowly, like milk in your coffee that turns just a second too late. And before you know it, everything tastes off. I hadn't planned to say anything to Mom. Not intentionally, but something about the way she looked at me when she walked into that kitchen, like she didn't expect to see me still there, like I was just some extra character in a story that had already been written without me, made the words slip out. "You always were better at pretending, Mom." That's all I said, calm, even, no fire in it. But it landed like a brick, and I saw it in her face. A small flickering wince, like a twitch she tried to smooth out. She didn't respond, just took the forks and turned away. But I could feel it sinking into her. Maybe not the full meaning yet, but the weight of something unspoken finally brushing against the surface. See, what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had been sitting on something for months, something Rachel never imagined would catch up with her. I'm not proud of how I found out. It wasn't like I was snooping or digging, but when you work in nonprofit circles and volunteer at fundraisers and attend those awful donor brunches with too many shrimp platters and not enough real conversation, you hear things, whispers, hints. And eventually, one of those hints had a name, a man's name. A man I recognized from Rachel's Facebook photos. Only it wasn't her boyfriend, or at least not the one she brought to Christmas. It was a hotel, a day and a time, and a very married man whose wife sits 2 pews in front of our parents at church every Sunday. I didn't plan to use it. I figured it wasn't my business. I let it sit in the back of my mind like some dusty old keepsake, something I'd only pull out if absolutely necessary. But that day, Standing there in the kitchen with my hands wet and my throat full of old wounds, it didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a mirror, and when I looked at my mother, I wanted her to see what she had refused to see for 30-something years, that her perfect daughter wasn't so perfect, that her forgotten daughter was the one holding the truth. I didn't spell it out, I didn't drop a bomb, but I said the name, quietly, almost gently, a whisper, not a scream. I dried another glass and placed it in the rack like I hadn't just lit a match inside the family home, and then I left. Now Rachel's texting me like I walked in with a shotgun, like I flipped the table and called out her sins in front of the neighbors. But that's not what happened. I told one truth. I handed it to the only person in that house who had the power to break the illusion. And the real shock, the part Rachel doesn't understand yet, is that I could have said a hell of a lot more. But I didn't. Not yet. There's something uniquely dangerous about the moment a golden child realizes the pedestal they've been standing on all their life might not be made of marble, but something far more fragile, something that can crack with the weight of a single truth finally spoken aloud. Rachel, for all her polish and practiced charisma, had never once considered the possibility that someone like me, quiet, compliant, reliable Carla, could be the one holding the chisel. That's what made this whole thing so ironic and so incredibly satisfying in the most bitter and complicated way imaginable. She was so certain I was harmless that I'd just keep showing up with my pies and my helping hands and my invisible support, while she basked in applause, collecting credit for a performance that was stitched together with carefully hidden betrayals. She hadn't yet connected the dots. Her text, demanding to know what I had said to Mom, was laced with the kind of entitlement that only someone accustomed to unconditional adoration could carry. What did you say to her? Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Did something happen?" Just that accusatory jab wrapped in concern. Like she still believed she was the protagonist in every scene, and the rest of us were just background noise, existing to react to her. But here's the part Rachel didn't know. The part that still hadn't reached her glossy little world of curated success and filtered photos. The truth was already starting to work its way through the cracks, and once it starts, once that seed of suspicion has been planted in the mind of someone like our mother, someone who has spent her entire life mastering the art of denial, there's no reversing it. There's only delay. There's only avoidance and shaking hands and late-night tears behind closed doors. As the perfect image starts to smudge around the edges, I didn't respond to Rachel's text right away. I left it hanging there, unanswered, because I knew that silence can sometimes be louder than any reply. And sure enough, by morning, I had 3 more messages, increasingly panicked and wrapped in that fake concern she puts on, like a designer jacket when she wants to appear vulnerable. "What's going on with Mom?" she wrote, followed by, "She won't talk to me." And then finally, "If this is about the promotion, you're being really unfair." That one made me laugh, out loud, sitting alone in my kitchen with my second cup of coffee, because only Rachel could still think this was about the promotion, as if I'd waited 41 years just to throw a tantrum over a job title. The truth? I didn't give a damn about the promotion. What I cared about was how easily the people who claim to love you can forget you exist when there's someone shinier in the room. What I cared about was how Rachel had been living a double life, showing up at family dinners with a different man every few months while carrying on a long-term affair, with someone who had 2 kids and a wife who volunteers at the same food bank, where I serve twice a month. And I know that because she told me. The wife. One Sunday, after sorting canned goods and sharing a lukewarm coffee, she opened up to me about the strain on her marriage, about the late nights and the odd credit card charges, and the perfume she didn't wear showing up on her husband's collar. And when she said his name, Travis, I felt something inside me twist. Travis, all clean-shaven, works in finance, loves boats and bourbon. And unmistakably the same Travis I had seen clinging to Rachel at that corporate event I attended on a whim, where I had shown up with a +1 invitation and no actual date. I had watched them from across the ballroom, her hand resting just a second too long on his shoulder. The way his mouth found her ear in moments that should have been strictly professional. I didn't confront her. Not then. I just filed it away because that's what I do. I observe, I record, I wait. And I waited. For months. Let it simmer beneath the surface while our mother bragged about Rachel's ethics and strong values, while Dad forwarded articles about her company's expansion and said things like, "She's going places, that one," as if I were just standing still. But when I whispered Travis's name to Mom, just his name, I saw her body still, her breath catch in her throat, and I knew she knew. Because even Mom, in her fog of willful ignorance, had noticed things she couldn't quite articulate. Rachel's evasiveness, her missed calls, the way she avoided questions about her dating life with a practiced smile and a quick pivot. And now, Rachel was unraveling. I could feel it in the silence between her messages, in the tension that suddenly replaced her usual ease. And just when I thought things might settle, when I believed maybe I had said enough to make my point, the universe, because it has a sick sense of timing, decided to twist the knife. Aunt Carol, drunk or maybe just fed up with decades of family bullshit, sent me a text of her own, short but sharp. "You've started a fire you can't control." I stared at it, reread it. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, unsure if I should laugh, cry, or ask what the hell she meant. Because Carol, for all her vodka-toned sarcasm and sharp-tongued quips, usually stayed out of the real drama. She watched from the sidelines, offered the occasional dry comment, but never took sides. So why now? Why me? Because she knew, or at least she suspected, about Travis, about Rachel, about the way Mom's world had been held together with duct tape and wishful thinking, and how a single whisper, just one name, could bring the whole damn thing crumbling down. And maybe that was the moment I realized I hadn't just told the truth. I had ignited something far deeper. What she doesn't know yet, what none of them fully understand, is that the match was never the threat. It was the gas-soaked foundation they all built their lives on. And once you smell the smoke, you can't pretend it's just the summer heat. There are moments in life that don't announce themselves with drama or spectacle, but instead arrive quietly, wrapped in tension so thick it feels like the air itself might split open if you move the wrong way. And one of those moments happened 3 days after the barbecue, when Rachel showed up unannounced at my office, wearing a tailored navy pantsuit and sunglasses too expensive for someone pretending not to be cracking. She didn't wait in the reception area or ask the assistant to page me like a normal person would. No, she marched straight into my workspace, as if the entire building was an extension of her own stage, pulling off her sunglasses like she was walking into a courtroom scene. She'd already decided she was going to win. And for a second, just a second, I wondered if she had practiced her lines in the car on the way over. She didn't say hello. She didn't ask if I was busy. She just stood there, arms crossed, her voice low but tight enough to slice through drywall, and said, "You told Mom about Travis, didn't you?" And there it was, confirmation that my quiet little truth had reached her finally. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just looked at her, measured, calm, letting the silence stretch long enough for her to start fidgeting, which she did, adjusting the strap of her handbag like it was strangling her. "I don't know what kind of twisted little game this is," she continued, her voice beginning to rise. "But dragging Mom into something that has nothing to do with her, just to make yourself feel better, is low, even for you." And that part made me laugh. Not out loud, not rudely, but in that subtle way where your body reacts before your brain has time to stop it. Because the sheer audacity of her acting like I was the one who'd somehow crossed a line, when she had been living a double life and lying to the entire family for the better part of a year, was so backwards it bordered on comedy. I didn't answer her accusation because I didn't owe her that, not anymore. Instead, I stood up, walked past her toward the door, and quietly closed it behind her, not because I was afraid of a scene, but because some things deserve privacy, even if the person you're talking to doesn't. I turned back to her, leaned against my desk, arms folded, not defensive, just steady, and said, "You're not mad I said something. You're mad I said something first." That hit her like a slap, and she blinked, once, slow, like she was trying to reboot. You always knew this was going to catch up with you, I added. You just thought it would be on your terms. She didn't deny it. That's the part that stuck with me. She didn't even try to play the victim, not really. Instead, she let out this sound, half sigh, half growl, and said, I knew you were jealous, but I didn't think you'd stoop to sabotage. That word, sabotage, bounced around the room like a stray bullet, and I felt something in me snap. Not loudly, not violently, but with the quiet certainty of a final decision. Jealous? I repeated, not shouting, just steady. Do you really think this is about jealousy? You think I'd trade places with you for 1 second? With your fake job title, your PR smiles, your married lover, and your empty little life? I paused there, not for effect, but because I needed a breath. You can keep the applause, Rachel. I've had enough of playing stagehand in your show. She didn't have a comeback for that. And maybe that's why she stormed out instead, slamming the door hard enough to make the window rattle, leaving behind the bitter scent of perfume, an unraveling delusion. I sat down slowly, let my hands rest on the keyboard without typing a word, and stared at the inbox that suddenly felt meaningless. Later that day, the family group chat exploded. It was Mom who started it, which was already unusual since she only ever used it to send birthday reminders and grainy photos of the backyard hydrangeas. This time, she typed a single sentence, which in itself felt like thunder. We need to talk about Rachel. And then chaos followed. Dad asked what was going on. Aunt Carol replied with a popcorn gift that somehow still made me chuckle through the tension. Rachel fired back with a flurry of messages about lies, betrayal, and how certain people were trying to ruin her life out of bitterness and loneliness. I didn't respond, not to any of it. Because at that point, it wasn't about what I said anymore. It was about what everyone else was finally starting to see for themselves. And that's what made the next move so easy, so instinctual, that I didn't even second guess it. I opened the Photos app on my phone, scrolled to the image I'd quietly taken months ago, Rachel's hand resting on Travis's shoulder in the lobby of that hotel, his wedding ring gleaming under fluorescent lights. And with one click, I posted it to my social media. No caption, no explanation, just the truth, sitting there in pixels, waiting to be acknowledged. It didn't take long. Within an hour, the post had comments, shares, private messages asking if it was really her, if it was really him. And the answer, of course, was yes. By the time the sun had set, the damage was spreading, subtle at first, then wide and fast like a brush fire in dry grass. Rachel's company had a values statement that didn't play well with scandal. Travis's wife, well, she had already known deep down, but now she had evidence. And my mother? She stopped calling, not just me, everyone. The silence from her was deafening, and I thought, for a brief, flickering second, that maybe I had gone too far. But then again, you always wanted a perfect daughter, didn't you, Mom? Maybe now you'll finally understand what it costs to pretend that one exists. There's a peculiar kind of silence that fills the space when the storm has passed. Not the comforting kind that follows resolution, not the warm quiet of closure or healing, but something colder, something brittle, like walking into a house after it's been emptied of furniture and finding that the echo of your own footsteps is louder than anything you left behind. That's the kind of silence I found myself sitting in, exactly 1 week after the barbecue that cracked open 3 decades of pretense. When I stood in my kitchen with a lukewarm cup of coffee and no appetite, scrolling through messages that had long since gone from accusatory to non-existent. Rachel hadn't texted since her little PR nightmare blew up across our town like a scandal in a high school yearbook. And Mom had gone radio silent in the most surgical way possible, as if her grief over a shattered illusion could only be expressed through complete withdrawal from both her daughters. There was no apology, no confrontation, just absence. And that was somehow worse. The fallout came not with a bang, but a slow and steady erosion. Rachel's once perfect career now dangling by a thread, with company PR teams scrambling to manage the narrative, while local news outlets sniffed around the edges of the story, hungry for another morality play to feed the masses. Travis, predictably, disappeared. I heard he moved out of his house, got a rental a few towns over, and was figuring things out, which in man-speak usually translates to avoiding consequences and waiting for everyone else to forget. His wife, bless her, found her voice and filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences with all the righteous fire of a woman who finally stopped asking permission to be angry. And me, I just went back to work. At least, that's what I told people. In reality, I was unraveling in my own way, not with drama or regret, but with a slow-burning exhaustion that made everything feel slightly out of focus. I wasn't sleeping well. I wasn't eating right. I'd wake up in the middle of the night thinking I'd heard the doorbell or my phone vibrating, only to find the house still, the screen blank. Because even though I knew I hadn't done anything wrong, not really, the weight of what I had unleashed didn't lift with the truth. If anything, it settled deeper into my chest, heavy and quiet, like grief with no funeral. It was Aunt Carol who finally broke the silence, arriving at my apartment with a half-empty bottle of bourbon and a pack of cookies. She probably shoplifted out of principle, plopping herself onto my couch like she owned the place, and saying without ceremony, "Families are good at faking, Carla. You finally called the bluff. Don't expect applause." She wasn't there to console me. That's never been her style. She was there to witness, in the same way a storm chaser doesn't try to stop the tornado, but needs to know what happens when it touches down. And when I asked her if I'd gone too far, if there was some other way I could have handled it, she didn't answer right away. Instead, she took a sip straight from the bottle, wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, and said, "Maybe, but what you did, it was honest, and honesty's like bleach. It doesn't just clean the stains, it strips everything. You can't expect it to leave the fabric the same." Later that night, after she left, and the apartment settled into quiet again, I found myself replaying everything. Not the confrontation with Rachel, not the text from her, not even the look on Mom's face in that kitchen. What haunted me, what played on loop in the back of my mind, was something far simpler, something I had almost forgotten. The moment I wiped that wine glass dry and handed it to Mom, that exact second before I spoke, when she looked at me not as her older daughter or as the person who'd stayed behind, while the world celebrated the younger one, but as a woman who had maybe, just maybe, started to see the cracks in her own reflection. She had looked afraid, not of me, but of what I represented, of truth, of imbalance, of a life built around a fantasy, and I couldn't stop wondering, did I speak out because I wanted justice, or did I finally want her to see me? Not the helper, not the second string, not the filler between Rachel's headlines, but me. The answer, if I'm being brutally honest, is both. In the days that followed, no one reached out. Not Mom, not Rachel. The group chat went silent. Our father, ever the diplomatic ghost, sent a weather update once, but nothing more. And yet, despite the ache, despite the strange hollowness of finally getting what I'd wanted, acknowledgement, however darkly earned, I didn't feel regret. I felt free, not clean, not innocent, not vindicated, but free. A few nights later, just as I was locking up and heading to bed, my phone lit up. One voicemail, no caller. I hit play, expecting spam, maybe a butt dial, but it was Mom. No words, just her breath, ragged, shaky, almost as if she was crying or trying not to. She never said my name. She never asked anything, just silence and breathing, and then the click of disconnection. I stared at the screen long after the message ended, wondering if that was her version of reconciliation or accusation. And the truth is, I still don't know. Maybe she'll never speak to me again. Maybe she will. Maybe the cost of my truth was her love. Or maybe it never really was love, just comfort and routine, in roles we didn't ask for, but learned to play. And maybe, just maybe, the wrong one left that night, because I walked away from that barbecue thinking I had nothing left to say. But maybe what I left behind, finally, was silence.